et bienvenue dans le preview de le weekend of the Timeform. And if you hadn't worked out already, Jamie Lynch is here to talk about
Winks in Australia. Oh, sorry. Winks is running tomorrow.
Is she?
Yeah.
Is it the Copper Cup?
No, not yet, but it's a prep run for that. But yeah, rather than the Aussie accent, we're going for the French. La bonne chance, la France. Oui. Because it's Prix de Triomphe weekend, biggest weekend of the flat for many people, including our good selves here at Timeform. We love it. We've produced loads of content for it on the website, produced cards for Sunday for sure, and all the race passes are included as well. So check it out because it's a really good resource when you're dealing with unfamiliar names in terms of the French horses and riders and trainers, because the more information you've got, the more easier it is to understand, and hopefully we just do your homework for you. That's the sort of idea with all these race passes and a lot of the Timeform stuff. Not telling you what to back exactly, but just doing your homework for you, especially when these French lessons can be particularly tricky.
Yeah. Apologies for the poor French.
Yeah.
I think
it was good.
Do you think? Well, I've got to see it at GCC, so I was hoping that it would not embarrass me. But we'll see how we go on now. What I've printed off. Are we going to start with Longchamp?
Yeah, Longchamp. ParisLongchamp.
The odds that I've printed off are printed in the complete wrong order, so I've had to write above each race, race 1, race 2. So we'll start with the Marcel Boussac.
Yes.
And it's the first of 6 Group 1s on the card, isn't it, I believe? Is it 6 or 5? 6.
Yeah.
So about as started as you get, and it looks pretty open, this. Rocks is the 5 to 3 favourite at the moment.
We have to roll our R's for this one, I think. Rock. 3 from 3, yeah. Probably the best French filly. And she won the trial race for this. Obviously, much like the British pattern programme, there are certain key races of which the Marcel Boussac is the one for 2-year-old fillies, and she won the trial race for this over the course and distance, so she's got that track craft which counts for plenty. She beat a horse called Seratonia that day for Charlie Appleby. Really interesting with Seratonia is that, think back to last year's Marcel Boussac and Wild Illusion. Wild Illusion won her maiden in Britain, went over to France for the trial and was beaten there, but learned from that and put it into practice and ended up winning the Marcel Boussac. Exactly the same profile and pattern with Seratonia, and it's her full sister as well, so not just a family connection but very much a seasonal connection to last year with Seratonia. And it's significant, isn't it, that Rock beat her convincingly, yet Charlie Appleby is willing and happy to let her rip against that one again.
What about star terms here for the Richard Hands team?
Really polished and professional star terms, was runner-up in the May Hill. That probably makes her, on Timeform terms at least, the standard setter as far as this race goes, which tells you probably that, yeah, we're not dealing in star fillies for this Group 1 in terms of the level that they bring. Star terms was only second in a Group 2 last time, and yet she, according to Timeform numbers, is the best filly in here. And I think that tells you that the standard isn't that high, and therefore a bit of improvement's going to go a long way. I'm fascinated by Pink Dogwood, who's the Aidan O'Brien runner. A, because Aidan had 5 or 6 in this even just a couple of days ago, and he's relying on one Pink Dogwood. And 2, because it's just one of those youngsters from Ballydoyle who sometimes they take a while to break the maiden, but once they break through that, the floodgates open. And I'm thinking about Japan in last week's Beresford Stakes, in that he wasn't impressive when he won a maiden, and yet he learnt an awful lot from that and put into practice and won that Group 2 last week. She won by 7 lengths when she won at Gowran, so it really was learning on the job, and you could see the power and the improvement pouring off her. And I'm really interested in her for the fact that she's got one of those blue blood Ballydoyle pedigrees. She's a full sister to, or half sister I think, to Latrobe, the Irish Derby winner. And I get the impression with her that now that surface has been scratched, that we're going to see an awful lot of improvement out of her. And I think that it tells you an awful lot, and it's really significant that Aidan is relying on Pink Dogwood. So just in the round, the standard's not high in the Marcel Boussac, and therefore you naturally look towards those who haven't yet had a chance in group company, who are under the radar. Not that any O'Brien horse can ever be under the radar, but Pink Dogwood, I think that we'll see a different horse today in this Group 1, or a Sunday.
Yeah, it's a path we're all too familiar with, isn't it? Aidan O'Brien horses stepping up from maiden company and suddenly turning into group performers.
So yeah, exactly right. Pink Dogwood, there's an awful lot of upside with her in the Boussac.
On to the second race now, the very French sounding Prix Jean-Louis Lagardère.
Very good.
And we've got an odds-on favourite here. It looks to me like Anthony Van Dijk is a non-runner, is that right?
Yes, sorry, Anthony Van Dijk isn't in the field, which is just 6. And Anador is going to be the odds-on favourite, yeah. So again, much like Rock in the first race for fillies, Anador won the trial race for colts over this course and distance. He made all the running that day. Just the one backhander to go clear at the finish. And even though he's got a moderate pedigree, what he's done on the track so far has been really impressive. And the reason he's not Timeform top rated is because Boitron, good that the English horse has even got a French name, isn't it? So joining in with that. Boitron's had 3 races in which to achieve a big figure. Anador's only had 2. So Boitron is unbeaten, so too is Anador. But that track craft that he showed last time in the trial, it made you think that he's really well set to go on from that trial and win the Lagardère itself. He's got all the power, all the potential. He might be able to control the race because we've got a small field. And I sort of hope, Nick, that he is a really good horse, because one of the stories, if not the story of this season, is these brilliant developing 2-year-olds we've got in Britain and in Ireland. And you really hope, or I sort of hope, that France come to the party in terms of that and that Anador turns it on.
We talked about Pink Dogwood in the early race, from being a maiden winner to going into group company. Is that a trick that Royal Marine could reproduce?
Yeah, good point, because Royal Marine, he played up his experience when he won at Doncaster, and I was watching that race thinking, oh right, I understand why he's won, because he had a run before at Newmarket which gave him an edge in experience. But in light of what's happened after Doncaster, Turgenev won by 6 lengths out of that race. The horse in behind, Politicised for William Haggs, has come out and won. It just makes you see that race and this horse in a slightly different light. And he's a really interesting runner in the sense of he's always clearly been held in high regard because of the entries he's had, but also because he went off 9-4 on his debut at Newmarket. And again, it looked an underwhelming debut, but considering the winner was Jash, who ran 10 Sovereigns close last week in the Middle Park, again, you see his performances in a different light because of how other horses have reflected on Royal Marine. So it's interesting that he's been set this assignment. He's got a jump to make for sure, from a maiden into a Group 1. But the fact it's only 6 runners gives him a helping hand in the fact that it won't be a shock to the system. And again, we've got a manageable race for your first dip into real proper company.
Okay, so on to the big one now, race number 3. Feels pretty early on the card for it to be the...
That's right. We're looking down a steep hill, aren't we, after the 305? And in between the Lagardère and the Arc de Triomphe, I think there's a Arab race, isn't there? An Arab Group 1.
I remember it last year, and I think I just went for a pint, to be honest.
Did you?
Yeah.
So in the Arab race, which horses do you fancy in particular?
I haven't got it in front of me,
Neither of us have got any notes.
We can talk about it if you like.
We can't talk about it because I don't know a runner. We can talk about the Arc though. I don't know if I've got much to add. Everyone knows the setup of the Arc in the terms of defending champion in Enable, difficult season but perfect comeback at Kempton. She's the best horse in the race. She's got the new Enable in the sense of a 3-year-old filly in Sea of Class who's developing well. She's got the French classic campaigned André Fabre in Voldgeist. She's got those 2 in particular to worry about, and then the rest are outsiders. And again, this is the sort of time of the week and the approach to the Arc where you look at those outsiders with a slightly different eye, but there's been money for Capri, for not Cliffs of Moher, Cloth of Stars, yeah, runner-up last year. So those have been squeezed at the bottom end of the market. And we sort of just need to talk about Enable. What's your good feeling that she's going to do it again or not?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I had my doubts about her coming into Kempton.
Yeah.
You a horse off for that long, you didn't think the same zest to be there, but the second that she just took away from Crystal Ocean, it's still there. And the question I was going to ask more than that was, what do you think about 3-year-old fillies in races like this? How much of an advantage is it for Sea of Class to be getting weight off all of
Yeah, so this is really interesting in the sense of one of the lines that's been trotted out in conjunction with the Arc is that 3-year-old fillies have a brilliant record, recent record in the Arc. 5 out of the last 10 winners of the Arc have been 3-year-old fillies, and it makes you think, well, that entitles Sea of Class to be the price she is, 7-2 second favourite. But the power of ratings is when it tells you about a horse's ability coming into a race, especially in the context of other horses in the same position. And the one point that we've always stressed about Sea of Class is this idea that even though she's a 3-year-old filly, there's a certain entitlement with that, but she's not packing the same ratings punch as every single one of the previous 5 3-year-old fillies. So Zarkava, Enable herself, Trev, and the other 2, I can't think of them, when they came to the Arc, they had bigger ratings coming here than Sea of Class by some way as well. So even though you'd look at a profile and think that's a perfect Arc contender, what ratings do is tell you about their strength relative to other horses in the mix, and you have to say the Sea of Class, for me now, is a little bit underpriced at 7-2, given that she's got a lot to find compared to what she did in either the Irish Oaks or the Yorkshire Oaks.
And we'll quickly ask you about Kew Gardens, because we've got a classic winner in here. He of course won the St Ledger, but I must admit, I'm writing the Sunday feature this week is me. It's about the Melbourne Cup. I was slightly surprised that they didn't send him there, to be honest.
Yeah, well, he looks to me a better fit for staying races than 1.5 mile races, and I think a lot of this stems from Ryan Moore himself, who's probably been quite adamant both in his discussions with the press, which have been brief, and his discussions with Aidan O'Brien, which have probably been more fulsome, about the fact that this is probably a 1.5 mile Group 1 horse. Now, that onboard experience must be slightly different from what we're seeing, because even though he had the Doncaster St Ledger in hand from the 2 pole, he was going past DXB and Old Persian and the Aidan O'Brien horse, who was Southern France and Southern France. So yes, even though he had the St Ledger at Doncaster in control from 2 furlongs out, the calibre of horses who he was going past then are a world away from the Sea of Class, the Enable, even the Voldgeist, from what he's facing here. So I'm sort of definitely in your camp of thinking that Kew Gardens, if he's going to win another Group 1, it's most likely going to be over 2 miles plus rather than coming back to 1.5 miles. Again, I've come round to the realisation that Ryan Moore might know a little bit more about racing than me, but by the same token I can only explain and illustrate from our point of view, company point of view as well, that we're dealing in a horse whose strength is stamina and who's got various points to prove in a top end Group 1 over 1.5 miles.
So you firmly in the Enable camp?
Yeah, I think the Enable will win. I think the Voldgeist will finish 2nd, and I think the Sea of Class will finish 3rd. That's the top in the market. Voldgeist is more of a threat from my point of view to Enable than Sea of Class, but I sort of hope that Enable just does what she did last year, because you not often get a race where you can point to a horse and say that's the best horse in the race. She proved it last year, and there hasn't much changed in the climate since then to think otherwise now.
Okay, race number 4 now, then the Prix de l'Opera, and it looks wide open to me. There's loads of different calibre of fillies in here, different profiles, but it's Wild Lucian who's favourite after winning the Nassau. Is she the worthy favourite?
Yeah, I think so. 3-year-old filly. She's been to France and done that. We talked about her winning the Boussac coming over at this time of year last year and doing that. The Nassau showed she was still developing, but she controlled that race, and she was the beneficiary of a good ride from William Buick that day to put a stamp on it from an early stage. And I just think that there are loads of horses in here who you can make a good case for, who are a much bigger price than her. With You's an interesting one. She was billed as almost a French Alpha Centauri before Alpha Centauri steamrolled her out the way in France last time. But she's interesting going back up to 1.25 miles, given that she's tried it twice before and hasn't won, but one of those was the French Oaks, and she was banged there until the last 50 yards, and there's a sense that she hasn't shown all she's got. Lady Frankel is interesting because Andre Fabre has sort of managed her ever so slightly and gradually this year, only 2 races, and the last time she was 4th in the Jean Romanet. That was behind Urban Fox, but she met all sorts of trouble. It's worth going back yourself and having a look at Lady Frankel's passage in that Prix Jean Romanet last time we saw her. But to tie a bow around it, it's the sort of race where it's much wiser and shrewder to have a look further down the market. And there's a French horse, Homerique, number 9 on the race card. Now, she was 3rd in the French Oaks, and last time out she was in the Prix de Moulin, which she just got swamped for speed. A mile wasn't for her, but she's been developing really well prior to that. She's got the perfect stall in 1 because she's got this stalking style where she wants to be close to the leaders and then do a pouncing towards the finish. So stall one plugs in really well with that. And she's got Christophe Soumillon on for the first time as well, which again will be a bonus around Longchamp. So she's just one of those horses who really struck me that her profile and her form isn't that different to horses who were ahead of her in the market. And I think she's around about 10 to 1, 12 to 1,
yeah, 14,
some 14 to 1.
Yeah.
She strikes me as one of those horses who will be a shorter price on the day as people sort of look into the form and the details that we've been able to in this morning. So Homerique, an interesting outsider, so to speak, in the Prix de l'Opera.
I feel like a broken record in mentioning it, but I always feel obliged to in Rhododendron.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 months ago, she was a Group 1 winner, and I mean, is she going backwards? I mean, she's 18s, 20s, she's running against her own sex. And
yeah. Oh, yeah, and she won this last year. Off a similar sort of misstep in that, remember when she was pulled up, wasn't she, in France last year, and she was nursed back to win this Prix de l'Opera. Again, she's just had sort of one step forward and two back with her right through the season. But you're right to say that I think she's Timeform top rated, so in terms of ability, she's numero uno, but people have sort of fallen out of love with her a little bit. It seems like Ryan Moore has fallen out of love with her a little bit because he's riding the 3-year-old Magic Wand. But it's one of those where I think that if you put all your chips on one particular horse, like for me, I like Homerique, or it might be Wild Illusion, or it might be Lady Frankel, you just save a chip to put on Rhododendron because you know that she's got the tools and the talent for this specific job. So it's good that you brought her up because she's one of those horses who the profile, or the form at least, a rating, doesn't quite fit or match up with the price that she is in the l'Opera.
So we'll go from the l'Opera to the l'Abbé, and I mean, this centres all around one horse, isn't it? Again, are we going to see Dr. Jekyll or are we going to see Mr. Hyde today?
Really good point to make, in that we've got Batash and we've got Enable, who are a sort of similar price for their respective assignments. And I think that if you had a poll, 90% of people would say that Enable is the better bet because we think of her as being a reliable old girl, whereas we think of Batash as being a bit more of a Jekyll and Hyde, as you said, and that darker side that meant he only finished 4th in the Runnerthorpe when we were ready to give him to it. 6 to 4 years or thereabouts. So that means, Nick, 6 to 4, that the way the bookies are approaching Batash, if this race was run 10 times, Batash would win 4 times. 4 times out of the 10 is what 6 to 4 effectively tells you. Now, you sort of think that he'd probably win 8 times out of 10, really, given how much power and pace that he's got and how brilliant he was in this race last year. But the reason why he's not odds on and why it's hard to back him and hard to love him is because he can fluff his lines on the bigger stage. And for a horse with his ability and with his Timeform rating, you know, when he looks good, he's sensational, isn't he? He's got this big Timeform rating of 136, but his record this year is 2 Group 2 races, which just doesn't match up with the ability that's inside. So that's always the issue with Batash. Personally, I think the 6 to 4 is a good price. I'm one of those people who think, right, I'm happy to weigh in with Batash and hope that we see the real deal because you know that he's the fastest horse in the race. If he doesn't turn up, what have we got? There's a really interesting horse, number 12, Tantheme, who's only a 3-year-old. He was supplemented into the Prix de l'Abbé this week because he won the trial race effectively. The Prix
de something or other.
Prix de Petit Couvert. I've read that from somewhere, I've got no idea whether it's true or not. But he's a 3-year-old who was favoured for the Prix Morne. He's a 2-year-old. And this year, this summer, in fact, he's really taken off and he's earned this spot via some dynamic performances included in that trial. So he's a bit like Voldgeist in the sense of you wouldn't have had him for the race 5 or 6 months ago, but he's got that momentum that really brings him into it. Obviously, it's one of my favourite races of the year, the Abbey, just to watch because you've got pace and power all the way through. My personal preference, I think that Batash is 6 to 4. I'm happy to back him at that price, thinking that he's going to win this race probably 8 times out of 10, rather than 4 times out of 10, as the market implies. But Tantheme's a fascinating runner. And you've got like Mabs Cross, Alpha Delphini. Alpha Delphini?
Yeah.
So that Nunthorpe form, and of course when the Nunthorpe happened, the story was Batash's failure. But Havana Grey's won a Group 1 out of the Dunthorpe since then, the Flying 5. And it's the sort of race that's got a history and a litany of big price horses turning up. So it's a fascinating race. I'm happy to back Batash at 6-4, but there's loads of horses that we can make a case for.
That's what I was going to ask you, because we saw at Royal Ascot that the Godolphin horse, Blue Point, was able to reel him in. And then at York, he didn't fire, but he was reeled in again, and he's got help to Havana Grey's going to want to go off fast as well. And in City Light and Mads Cross, they play their cards very late. Will they be able to live with him, do you think?
Yeah. The curious thing with Batash is that I think that York last time in the Dunthorpe, that was the first time that he had no excuse, because previously it was either his bit nutty nature, which got the better of him at the start, or certainly at Royal Ascot in the race that you mentioned, the King's Stand, that he won the battle and lost the war, in the sense of he took Lady Aurelia on and beat her hands down and drained her. But because he'd gone through that, he was run down late by Blue Point. But York was the first time that left me scratching my head saying, I can't excuse you that, I don't know what went on. If we know about his frailties, then the other riders and trainers do as well. So what Batash would ideally want is some clear space and just a lane to run in, and away we go and watch how fast I am. But he won't be afforded that opportunity because others will be out to get him. And there is a scenario here where they go like hell for leather and the pace collapses and something comes from left field, from out the back, and to run them all down. So it's a fascinating race in various angles. I'm one of those who just rather play the straight bat with Batash, but it's going to be a great race to watch.
So one more to go, Group 1 wise, Prix de la Forêt, and Polydream's quite a short price here, won the Maurice de Guise last time.
So Inns of Court is an interesting runner because he's shown at times that he's a Group 1 horse for sure. Sir Dancelot is an interesting runner because to win Group 2s under a penalty, he must be a Group 1 horse, and this is a specialist trip of 7 furlongs. Gustav Klimt's always an interesting runner because you get the impression that if he ever rolled his sleeves up and put it all in, he'd prove himself a Group 1 horse. But the only true Group 1 horse in this lineup is this Polydream. And she did remarkably well to catch James Garfield in that Maurice de Guise, given that she came from the other group. He had a brilliant tactical advantage, purveyed by Frankie Dettori that day, and she worked wonders to run him down. So yeah, this is one of those, Nick, where probably like you and like most people at home, you see the odds and you think, well, that's a short price, Polydream, 13-8. But I think there's a simple bottom line of that she is a one true Group 1 horse in the lineup, and that she might still be getting better as well. So she's got a perfect playground in terms of 7 furlongs around there. She's coming in off the hottest performance of her life. One that's been boosted by the Spring Cup, for example. The Tin Man was in behind that day, amongst others. And this is a really simple case of just back the best horse in the race and hope she gets the luck with a run through.
I've noticed Dutch Connection's a pretty big price at 20-1. Now he is a monkey and he doesn't always give his running, but I do think he's a 7 furlong horse and he doesn't get any opportunities over here to show that.
Really good point in that he's a 7 furlong horse who, because of the programme in Britain, he often has to race either at 6 or a mile. And how many races do you see in Britain with 17 runners over 7 furlongs? It very rarely happens. So this is something unusual for Dutch Connection, but it's exactly the seam that he specialises in, isn't it? Well run, strongly run in fact, 7 furlongs, around a bend as well. That's perfect for Dutch Connection in theory. So it's a good spot by you to say that, well, Dutch Connection's 20-1. That's based on his series of performances in races in which he struggles because the scenario isn't right. He's 20-1 now when the scenario is, in theory at least, really perfect for Dutch Connection. So will you be having a little few euros on him just as an outsider?
No. Burnt fingers.
Burnt finger, oh yeah, 2 burnt fingers.
Yeah, but be watching with interest, I think. We'll get our Brexit caps on now and head back to Bright Blighty on the Saturday, because there is some Group 1 action over here as well in the form of the some Chariot Stakes.
Yes.
And I mean, I've been watching too many boxing press conferences this week, but we've got the lineal champion in here in terms of Lawrence, the filly that beat the filly.
The filly that beat the filly. Yeah, we need Michael Buffer to introduce Lawrence, doesn't she? Because she's got such an impressive win record. What's interesting about this race is that we've talked a lot about the British raiders going over to France. We've got a French raider coming over for this Sun Chariot, and the French have got a brilliant record in this specific Group 1 for fillies, Wind Chimes. Not only is she here, but she's been supplemented into the race this week, which is really telling, isn't it, for André Fabre. She was second to Recolitos, probably the best French miler last time in the Prix de Moulin. And yeah, just look at that surface profile with her. Runner-up in the Group 1 last time, André Fabre, no Alpha Centauri, which is the sort of main thread of these fillies mile races. And that's the point with Lawrence, isn't it? In that there's only so much praise you can give her when Alpha Centauri had that injury during the race, which has meant her premature retirement. And I love Lawrence because of what she represents and because of that will to win that just permeates her whole career. But as a bettor and a punter, I'm always wanting to be against Lawrence because she's one of those where the reality doesn't quite match the myth in terms of this brilliant win record, but she hasn't quite got the ability or the ratings to justify that. And it's always fine margins with her. The widest winning margin she's ever won by is 3/4 of a length, despite all those great wins. So I'll always be happy as a punter to be against Lawrence, even though I'll always tip my hat in tribute to her will to win and her tenacity. But just in terms of the pricing here of the race, there was a horse who really stood out to me as being overpriced, and that's this Al Jazi. Now, we know what Al Jazi needs. She needs a mile, she needs fast ground, and she needs to be fresh. When she's got those three permutations, she's really good, like she was at Royal Ascot. Remember when she won the Duchess of Cambridge? Duchess of Cambridge, is that right?
I'll take your word for it, yeah.
You should say in the comment.
Duke of Cambridge.
Duke of Cambridge, yeah. Duchess of Cambridge is the 2-year-old race, if it is. I don't know. But it was that Group 2 that's always well subscribed at Royal Ascot. She won that by like 3 3¼ lengths from Tribute Act. But those three factors are in play with Al Jazi here because it's been 2 months since she last ran, and that was against With You, the horse we talked about for the Prix de... They've all melded into one now.
Yeah.
But that was a steadily run race, and that was no good to Al Jazi because she was weighted with, and when she tried to quicken, the leaders just didn't come back. So that was the last time we saw her. She's been freshened up for this, and the crucial thing is the ground, because even though we're into October now, the ground is still officially good to firm at Newmarket. I think it's going to stay good to firm, and I think that her price is based on the fact that, well, we've got a lot of 3-year-olds in here, so the 2 older horses are being pushed out a little bit in terms of understanding and certainly in terms of the betting. But also this idea that it's October, therefore it's not going to be fast ground, but in actual fact it probably is. And she's about 14 or 16 to 1, which really underestimates how good she is when she's got her ideal conditions. And against the odds, it seems she has her ideal conditions, and factoring into that is a well-run race as well. So this is a filly with Group 1 power for sure, because she wins the Group 2s by wide margins, and she's got ideal circumstances, and she's a double-figure price. So to me, Al Jazi is a really good bet in the Sun Chariot, and I'll just take any medicine if one of the 3-year-olds is too good for her, or 2 or 3 of the 2-year-olds are too good for her. Wind Chimes is the one to beat for sure. I love Lawrence, but I'll always take her on. But Al Jazi, she makes all sorts of sense to me in the Sun Chariot.
Well, in the spirit of this weekend, I think it feels right to close on and just say bon chance.
Bon chance, everyone. Good luck. Is that what it means?
I think so.
Yeah. Bon chance.